In July 2014, a Navy nurse who had served this country for 18 years decided forced feedings to prisoners at Guantanamo Bay went against the professional code of ethics, and he could not participate in these feedings any longer. He felt these forced feedings violated Provision 1 of the Code of Ethics, which states that if a patient deemed competent, respect for self-determination and autonomy should always be the priority in care. Also, the Code of Ethics states in Provision 4 that the nurse is accountable for their own actions, so even though he had orders to force feed, he was still accountable for his actions. To uphold Provision 5, the nurse felt he had to refuse to participate in an action that he believed endangered a patient and violated his moral standards. There is an ethical dilemma here because the nurse and the military had different perspectives. The military said, "We cannot allow these prisoners to commit suicide by hunger strikes." They argued that the nurse should honor the principle of beneficence and non-maleficence, and that the enteral feeds should be given to prevent death. Questions about if these prisoners were actually trying to commit suicide were discussed. As a nurse, you must intervene if a patient is attempting to commit suicide. Although the prisoners' lawyers protested, saying that the prisoners were not trying to die, but merely protesting their unhappiness with prison conditions. There were many conflicts between the ethical principles of autonomy, beneficence, and non-maleficence. To add another layer, we can discuss organizational ethics. The nurse was a Navy nurse. Military nurses not only have a commitment to their patient, but also a commitment to the mission. It took a lot of moral courage to stand up for what he believed was ethically right and face the repercussions. The social implications are related to the fact that these people being force-fed were not patients. They were prisoners of war. Some may argue that they do not deserve the same rights as the rest of us. Although the World Medical Association Declaration of Malta on Hunger Strikers in 2006 concluded that forcible feedings are never ethically acceptable. Similarly stated in Boyd in 2015, force feedings of a prisoner is cruel and it violates their basic human rights. So is it ethical to force feed a prisoner? Some would have to agree with the military and say yes, because it is the intention that you're looking at, and the intention is good, to save the prisoners from death. Others would say no. It is unethical to force feed prisoners because the nurse is responsible for the consequences of his actions. Using the 6-step process as a guide, it can address this issue. Step 1. Gather all the information. What clinical guidelines supported forced enteral feedings during the hunger strikes? What risks are involved in these feedings? And what other approaches could be utilized to get these prisoners to eat? Step 2. Identify the ethical problem. The Navy nurse is experiencing moral distress over being ordered to force feed the prisoners. The dilemma is between different viewpoints on the ethical priorities. The prisoner's right to autonomy versus beneficence and non-maleficence. Step 3. The ethics theory to analyze the problem. By using a deontological approach of principles of duties and rights, the nurse would have a more compelling responsibility to the prisoner and should choose preserving the prisoner's autonomy. Step 4. Explore practical alternatives. By thinking of some far-fetched alternatives instead of force feeding, maybe they can achieve the goal of ending these hunger strikes. Options like giving in to small demands, anything to help coax them into eating. Another option is to do the same as this Navy nurse did and refuse to participate in these feedings and face potential dishonorable discharge from the Navy. And yet another option this nurse had was to do nothing and continue to participate in these forced feedings and live with the actions that went against his personal values. Step 5 will be to complete the action, which in this case the nurse had the moral courage to stand behind his personal values and the professional code of ethics. In this case, I do agree with him. I think by shining light on the situation, maybe alternatives to this could be thought of. We obviously do not want these prisoners to starve to death, but there has to be a better answer. Step 6. Evaluate the process and the outcomes. Once the Navy nurse acted, there was much debate over the topic. The final court decision did allow the nurse to finish his final 2 years in the Navy and receive his retirement benefits. He was able to resolve his personal moral distress by upholding his moral values and duties. The situation of the force feeding is still not resolved, but maybe this nurse's actions will help the military have a new perspective and change in organizational ethics regarding prisoners and force feedings to increase learning and bring out best practice in this setting.